My mother-in-law locked the front door in my face, tossed my baby bag onto the driveway, and spat, "There's no room in this house for a useless wife." Just 3 days post-C-section, holding my screaming newborn daughter in the freezing rain while my spineless husband looked away, I thought my life was over. My in-laws believed they had stripped me of my dignity, my home, and my future. But as I stood shivering on that pavement, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. The door opened, and my mother stepped out, not with tears, but with a sharp attorney and an official folder in her hands. When the lawyer pulled out the property deed and said, "Actually, this isn't your house," my mother-in-law's face turned completely pale. What happened next wiped the smirks off their faces forever, proving that cruelty always comes with a price tag. My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and 3 days ago, I underwent an emergency C-section to bring my daughter, Lily, into the world. When my husband, Mark, drove me home from the hospital, I expected relief. I expected to lay in my own bed and finally breathe. Instead, the moment we pulled up to the driveway, my mother-in-law, Evelyn, stood on the front porch with her arms crossed. Beside her stood my father-in-law, Richard, looking indifferent. Before I could even step through the front door, Evelyn slammed it shut in my face and turned the deadbolt. She reached over, grabbed my packed baby bag off the porch, and tossed it onto the damp driveway grass. "There's no room in this house for a useless wife," she spat, her voice cold enough to freeze the summer air. I stood there in utter disbelief, clutching my crying newborn to my chest, every muscle in my abdomen screaming in agony. Evelyn demanded that I hand over my entire maternity leave savings immediately to pay rent for staying under her roof. When I refused to give up my only financial safety net, she decided my time was up. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to step in, to protect his wife and newborn child. But he just avoided my eyes, staring down at his shoes like a coward. They believed they had stripped me of everything, my home, my dignity, and my future. But what Evelyn didn't realize was that her cruel ultimatum was about to unleash a storm she never saw coming. The cold rain began to fall, mixing with the sweat on my forehead as I stood shivering on the concrete pavement. Lily was screaming now, her tiny lungs straining against the damp chill, and every single cry felt like a dagger piercing right through my heart. I pressed her closer to my chest, trying to shield her small body with my thin jacket, but the physical pain from my fresh surgical stitches was becoming absolutely unbearable. It felt like I was being torn apart from the inside out. I turned to Mark, my voice trembling with a mixture of sheer exhaustion and desperation. "Mark, please do something. Look at your daughter. She's freezing. We need to go inside." Mark finally looked up, but there was no love or protection in his eyes. There was only the hollow, weak compliance he had always shown toward his mother. "Just give her the savings, Sarah," he muttered, his voice flat and devoid of any real empathy. "You're being completely dramatic. Mom just wants to make sure we're contributing. If you would just stop being so stubborn, apologize, and hand over the money, she'd let us back inside in a second. You're bringing this on yourself." Up on the porch, Evelyn smirked through the glass window, watching my misery with a look of pure triumph. She truly believed she had broken me. She thought I was completely isolated, helpless, and trapped with nowhere left to turn. They expected me to fall to my knees, beg for forgiveness, and surrender every ounce of control over my life just to survive the night. But as I looked at my husband's cowardly face, something inside me hardened. The weeping, vulnerable girl they thought they could easily manipulate disappeared, replaced by a mother who would do whatever it took to protect her child. Just as my knees began to buckle from the excruciating pain, the low rumble of an engine echoed down the quiet suburban street. A sleek black sedan pulled up directly behind Mark's car, its headlights cutting through the darkening rain. The rear passenger door opened and my mother, Helena, stepped out. She didn't look flustered or tearful. Her expression was set in stone, radiating an aura of cold, undeniable authority. Beside her stepped a tall man carrying a thick leather briefcase, Mr. Vance, one of the most ruthless real estate attorneys in the city. Mark blinked in confusion as my mother rushed over, wrapping a warm, dry blanket around Lily and ushering me toward the warm interior of her car. "Get inside, Sarah," she whispered fiercely, her eyes locking onto mine with fierce protection. "I've got it from here." Before Evelyn or Mark could process what was happening, Helena and Mr. Vance marched straight up the porch steps. Evelyn opened the door slightly, her sneer returning. "Helena? What is this nonsense? Get off my property before I call the police for trespassing." Mr. Vance didn't flinch. He unzipped his briefcase, pulled out a framed, stamped document with an official golden seal, and stepped directly into Evelyn's personal space. "I suggest you don't call the police, Mrs. Miller," Mr. Vance said, his voice echoing off the brick walls with sharp precision. "Because if anyone is trespassing, it's you. This property doesn't belong to you or your husband. It never did." Evelyn's smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden, nervous twitch in her jaw. Mr. Vance held up the document. 15 years ago, Sarah's late father purchased this home and leased it to you under a private agreement managed by Helena. You are tenants, Mrs. Miller. And as of 5 minutes ago, your lease is officially terminated. Evelyn stared at the document, her hands beginning to tremble as the color drained completely from her face. "This is a lie. My husband and I have lived here for 15 years. We paid for this house." "You paid rent, Evelyn," my mother interjected, her voice dangerously calm. "Rent that was discounted to a fraction of the market rate because my late husband felt sorry for your family's financial failures. You mistook our generosity for ownership, and you mistook my silence for weakness." Evelyn turned frantically toward Mark. "Mark, tell them. Tell this lawyer he's wrong." Mark stood frozen on the driveway, looking like a deer caught in headlights. He couldn't even meet his mother's eyes. Mr. Vance adjusted his glasses and pulled out another sheet of paper from his briefcase. "Actually, Mr. Miller knew all about this arrangement," Mr. Vance said, eyeing Mark with disgust. "He signed the lease renewal as a witness 2 years ago. He knew his parents didn't own this home, yet he allowed his wife to be thrown onto the street under false pretenses." I gasped from inside the car, watching my husband's cowardly posture collapse even further. He had known the whole time. He had let his mother play the arrogant matriarch and abuse me for years, all while sitting on a massive lie. "Furthermore," Mr. Vance continued, stepping closer to Evelyn, "the terms of your lease explicitly state that any attempt to unlawfully exclude the landlord's family from the premises, or any failure to cover municipal property taxes, which you are currently 3 years behind on, constitutes an immediate breach of contract. You have violated every single term, Mrs. Miller." Evelyn's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, her arrogant composure completely shattered. The quiet neighborhood suddenly felt dead silent as the harsh reality of her greed crashed down around her. Evelyn backed away from the porch, clutching the doorframe as if the house were slipping through her fingers, which it quite literally was. "You can't do this to us," she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. "Richard, get out here. They're trying to steal our home." Richard hurried to the front door, but as soon as he saw the legal seal on the documents and the cold determination in my mother's eyes, his face went completely blank. He knew Mr. Vance's reputation. He knew they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Mr. Vance pulled out the final document from his folder and handed it directly to Richard. "Because you have defaulted on 3 years of property taxes totaling over $20,000, and because you illegally locked out my client's daughter while she was in a vulnerable post-medical state, we have secured an emergency order to vacate." "An emergency order?" Evelyn gasped, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "What does that mean?" "It means, Mrs. Miller," Mr. Vance said, his voice dropping into a hard, unforgiving tone, "you have exactly 24 hours to pack your personal belongings and hand over the keys. If you are still on this property by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, local law enforcement will remove you for criminal trespass, and Helena will press full charges for property tax fraud." Evelyn looked at me through the rain-streaked window of the car. The smug, sadistic bully who had tossed my baby's clothes onto the lawn just 20 minutes ago was gone. In her place was a terrified, desperate woman realizing that her arrogance had just made her homeless. She had tried to destroy me, But in doing so, she had completely undone herself. My mother got back into the car, put it in drive, and we pulled away, leaving Mark and his parents standing under the porch light, paralyzed in absolute horror. I never spent another night in that house, and I never looked back. With Mr. Vance's help, I moved into a peaceful, quiet apartment paid for entirely by my own savings, the savings Evelyn had been so desperate to steal. The very next morning, I signed the paperwork to initiate divorce proceedings against Mark. I filed for full legal and physical custody of Lily, along with maximum child support. When Mark realized the full extent of what was happening, he tried to fix things. He called me dozens of times a day, weeping into the phone, begging me to reconsider. He claimed he was sorry, that he had been caught in the middle, and that his parents were now staying in a tiny, dingy motel because they couldn't afford a proper rental. But I blocked his number. He hadn't been caught in the middle. He had chosen his side the moment he let his post-surgery wife and newborn freeze in the rain. During the divorce settlement, Mark was forced to sign over his rights to any marital assets to offset the years of unpaid back rent his family owed my mother. Within 6 months, the divorce was finalized. Evelyn and Richard were forced to liquidate their savings to pay off their massive tax debt, eventually settling into a rundown one-bedroom apartment on the far side of town. Mark was left with nothing, no house, no savings, and no family to hide behind. I had taken back complete control of my life, my finances, and my daughter's future. 1 year later, as I sit in the sunlit living room of my new home in Carmel, watching little Lily take her very first steps across the hardwood floor, a profound sense of peace washes over me. The pain of that cold, rainy evening feels like a distant memory, but the lesson will stay with me forever. Cruelty and deceit will always betray the person who uses them. Evelyn tried to throw me out like trash to assert her power, but all she did was expose her own greed and lose the roof over her head. Mark thought staying silent would keep his comfort, but his cowardice cost him his daughter and his future. Standing up for myself wasn't easy, but it was the best decision I ever made. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Have you ever had to stand up to toxic in-laws? Comment your thoughts below. And let me know which city or country you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories. Thank you for watching until the end.